What if the man you called Dad had a secret past so disturbing it could explain why he vanished without a trace? It was late August of 1996, and at just 19, I walked into a silence that screamed louder than any noise. My mom was at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in front of her. A sight so unusual, it instantly replaced my hangover with a wave of dread. She never drank in the daytime. She never just sat. When she finally spoke, her words hit me like a physical blow. "Your dad is gone. He's not coming back." My first thought was death. When she shook her head, a brief island of relief buoyed me, only to be swallowed by a sea of shock. How? Where? When? She didn't know. The more I pressed, the more upset she became. He'd packed a suitcase, driven off, vanished without a note, without a word. For months, his absence hung over us, an unspoken weight. Relatives called, checked on US, but never. Why? He left. Any mention of the mystery, and my mom would crumble, or worse, lash out. "You don't talk to me about that piece of crap. He's dead to me." Her fierce, unyielding silence, coupled with my own aching curiosity, fueled a burning need for answers. I knew she was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. My first lead was Carl, my dad's oldest friend. If anyone knew, it would be him. But Carl was just as blindsided. He had no clue why my dad disappeared, but he did suggest a few places my dad might have gone, including a tiny, remote town in northern Canada called Wrigley. My dad had spent a summer there in college and always reminisced about it, even talked about going back. I ruled out Portland, then Lincoln City. Wrigley, 30 hours of driving through the Canadian wilderness, was my last resort. Wrigley was the very definition of isolation. 100 or so people, mostly First Nation, one gas station, one medical clinic, the nearest RCMP office hundreds of miles away. To me, it meant nowhere to hide. I made the arduous journey in July of 1998, arriving after 3 days of driving from Portland, sleeping in my car because the nearest motel was too far. My first stop in this desolate outpost? The gas station. There, I met Winston, a man in his late 30s or early 40s, the station's attendant. He was friendly, remarking on the rarity of outsiders, which gave me an opening. I showed him a recent photo of my dad. No recognition. Then, I pulled out an old college-era picture. My dad, much younger, standing beside a similarly aged woman, both in hiking gear, pointing at a rock formation. Winston's eyes lit up. He recognized the landmark, Hunter's Rock, about 10 miles outside of town. He regaled me with local legends and geological facts about it, but it was his sudden, intense focus on the girl in the photo that sent a shiver down my spine. "Do you know her?" he asked, his voice low. When I said no, he took the photo to the back, made a hushed phone call. The chilling revelation came next. With about 80% certainty, Winston said, "That's Susan Culver. Went missing back in the early 70s, near Great Bear Lake." He remembered her from old missing person posters. He told me to check with the local government office inside the medical clinic for confirmation. The office was closed until morning, so I spent a restless night, the image of Susan Culver's face haunting my thoughts. The next morning, I walked to the clinic. Inside, I met Chief Irwin of the Bzaki First Nation, a welcoming, generous man who initially beamed, offering to set me up with a guide. But when I told him my story, searching for my father, his smile faltered. Then, I showed him that second photograph. I'll never forget the transformation. His face, moments ago warm and open, turned utterly cold, almost menacing. "I think you and me should step into my office," he stated, his voice flat. My heart hammered with a strange mix of dread and excitement. This was it. After 18 months of dead ends, this man knew something. What he told me next blew my world apart. The girl in the picture was Susan Culver, a King's University graduate who vanished in the summer of 1973. But then, he pointed to my dad. He was one of the potential suspects arrested by the RCMP, the chief said, questioned not once, but twice, in connection with her disappearance. It was shocking, yes, but in a twisted way, it was progress, a lead, a potential reason for my dad's sudden disappearance, a ghost from his past, a secret so profound it could unravel his entire life. Could his flight be a delayed reaction to this unspeakable trauma? Was he running from something he'd done, or something that had merely tainted him? The chief explained that Susan Culver's remains were never found, so no one was ever charged. Her last known location was the jaws of Great Bear Lake, in what the tribes call the Sawu lands. That's where the Mounties found her abandoned, undisturbed campsite. The chief hadn't seen my dad recently, but speculated that if my dad was heading straight to Hunter's Rock or Great Bear Lake, he wouldn't have stopped in town, especially a place holding such dark memories of his arrest. The problem was getting to Great Bear Lake, a 200-mile drive to Deline, then a 30-mile hike through marshlands, a hellish trek I wasn't equipped for, physically or financially. I had taken a week off work already, stretched my budget to its limit. Should I cut my losses, go home? Should I call my mom and beg for money, risking her wrath and my job? The thought of living with the regret of inaction gnawed at me. And then Chief Irwin mentioned it. Deline had an RCMP office, the very place my dad had been questioned. They'd have the records. That sealed it. I called work. I called my mom. My manager, to his credit, understood. My mom? That was a battle. She had no idea where I was or what I was doing. She demanded I come home, refused to send money. It took 30 minutes of tearful argument from the Wrigley gas station office phone before she relented. I owe Winston, the gas station attendant, so much for his privacy during that call, and for agreeing to drive me all the way to Deline just for gas money. He was clearly invested in my story, especially after I shared what Chief Irwin had told me. But before we set off, he looked at me, a profound gravity in his eyes. "If your dad's out looking for the girl, and you're out looking for him," he said, "who's going to end up looking for you? You ever think about that?" The question chilled me to the bone. I hadn't, not once. On the drive to Deline, Winston talked me out of hiking into the marshes. It was too dangerous, too ill-equipped. My best bet was the RCMP office. We arrived 5 hours later. Winston headed to the grocery store, and I went in alone. Constable Jacobs, a young Mountie, greeted me. When he realized my inquiry was more than routine, he radioed Mackenzie, an older officer who had actually been a junior constable during the 70s investigation. Mackenzie was frosty at first, but slowly warmed as I laid out my story. He remembered the Susan Culver case, remembered my dad stumbling into Deline, reporting Susan missing, and how, after initial questioning, my dad was considered a suspect. Mackenzie hadn't been present for the interviews, so he didn't know the specifics, just that my dad had somehow implicated himself. The files were there, but he couldn't share them without proper clearance, a process that could take months. It was frustrating, but I'd come too far. I wasn't going home empty-handed. Mackenzie and Jacobs promised to keep an eye out for my dad. That night, back in Wrigley, trying to sleep in my car, I woke to a knock on the window. It was Mackenzie, in his distinctive red jacket. He climbed into the passenger seat, reached into his pocket, and produced a cassette tape. My heart leaped. I knew, without seeing the label, exactly what it was. Mackenzie told me to turn on my car's tape player. I did. He slid the tape in. My suspicions were confirmed. It was my dad's first interview, the one from before he was arrested. Since he wasn't a suspect yet, my dad was incredibly forthcoming. He and Susie, as he called her, were camping. Susie got up to pee outside the tent. Seconds later, she screamed. My dad, boots on, flashlight in hand, ran out. And that's when he saw them. "Who are they?" one Mountie asked. My dad's voice on the tape was strained, almost unhinged. "If I tell you, you'll think I'm crazy." He muttered something about how they never would have gone there, not in a million years, if they knew they were out there. "Where did they take Susan Culver?" Another Mountie pressed. "I don't know," my dad sobbed, "but wherever it was, she's probably dead. She had to be. There's no way she could survive what they were doing to her." "Who are they?" the Mountie demanded again. My dad exploded, a frantic, unhinged rant. "How do you guys not know? You live out here." No wonder they suspected him of murder. His agitation grew with every question. He couldn't explain why he wasn't taken, why there wasn't a drop of Susan's blood, despite his claim of a violent attack. Then, the Mounties terminated the interview. The tape went dead. Mackenzie confirmed the second tape wasn't worth listening to. After that first interview, based on my dad's certainty of her death, they arrested him. The second interview? My dad stonewalled, smart enough not to say another word until he was released due to lack of evidence. Mackenzie confirmed the search for Susan continued for 10 more days. Her campsite was found, undisturbed, but no trace of her body, no clothes, no blood. Years later, her parents had her declared legally dead, but Mackenzie revealed one chilling detail that caught his attention in the files. Towards the end of the search, an RCMP search dog ran off and was never seen again. A mini-search was launched, but neither Susan nor the dog were ever recovered. The dog's disappearance was chalked up to an operational hazard, but Mackenzie believed there was a lot more to it. Where the hell did they go? Mackenzie's unproven theory was that my dad and Susan stumbled upon an illicit drug grow site, but little else, he admitted, explained my dad's comments. Mackenzie left, leaving me to an uneasy sleep. Hearing my dad's young voice, so like my own, was surreal. But what he said, how he said it, that was the nightmare. Driving back, I was a tangle of sadness and fear. I'd never felt so close to finding him, yet he'd never felt so distant. All his life, he'd likely been dealing with the aftermath of whatever happened in the Northwest Territories. I still don't know how much my mom knew, but I, personally, had been completely ignorant. It was April of 2000 now, 2 years later, and I was no closer to the full truth of his disappearance. But I had a much better idea of where to look. And now, I could hold my own on a solo hiking trip. I was ready to go looking for him. I was planning to head back to Deline in the summer, probably June, and I would write everything I found. This journey for truth led me to unexpected places and unsettling encounters, revealing the dark underbelly of human nature. Speaking of unsettling encounters, sometimes the most ordinary places hide the most extraordinary and terrifying secrets. Ever felt a shiver down your spine when you're alone, just a routine stop, and suddenly you're not so sure you're safe? Sometimes the most mundane places, like a quiet gas station in the middle of nowhere, become stages for deeply unsettling, even terrifying encounters. My name is Laura, and I'm in my 30s, from Leeds in the north of England. Back in my Loughborough uni days, I worked morning shifts at a petrol station, 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. It was a good gig, usually quiet after the morning rush, leaving me time to read. But one Tuesday morning, a customer walked in who instantly turned my stomach. He was in his 40s or 50s, a spitting image of Mark Bolan from T, Rex's album cover, but twisted like an evil twin. Same dark, curly hair, same tired eyes, but gaunt, sharp features, as if a skeleton had been thinly covered in wet tissue paper. His sheepskin coat, bright pink t-shirt, and bell-bottoms, though vintage, only highlighted his creepy, unwashed appearance. I usually didn't care much about how people looked. A petrol station isn't a nightclub. But this man, he radiated something deeply wrong. He grabbed a pint of milk, paid for his fuel, and then, instead of leaving, he just stayed. He looked at me, a leer in his eyes, and said, "You're a very pretty young lady, aren't you?" The way he drew out the squeaky, childlike tone of, "aren't you?" They made my skin crawl. I'm not good with compliments, but this was a whole new level of greasy. I forced a polite "thank you" and turned to walk towards the stockroom, a common tactic to signal I'm busy. But he didn't take the hint. "Where are you going?" he demanded, a hint of aggression creeping into his voice. I explained I was on the clock, had work to do. He scoffed, "Well, I'm a customer." He then launched into a bizarre monologue about how he rarely got to talk to a girl as pretty as me, wanting to make the most of it. He waved away my concerns about my boss, saying, "I'll deal with your boss if he complains." Then came the line that truly made my blood run cold. "I wish I was as pretty as you." My mind reeled. It was beyond creepy. It was wrong. Trying to stay professional, I told him his comments were inappropriate. He chuckled, a short, disturbing snort, and asked, "Don't you like being pretty?" I just wanted to run, to scream, to kick something, but I was terrified he'd follow. I repeated that I didn't appreciate his tone and that if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. His fake outrage quickly dissolved into a guttural growl. "What? You're really going to call the bloody police just 'cause someone called you pretty? Are you taking the piss?" I kept asking him to leave, praying he'd run out of steam. But he just kept going, getting more unhinged. "You know," he snarled, "if I looked like you, I'd just stay at home all day without a stitch of clothing on, just staring at myself in the mirror." That was chilling. But then he crossed the line into outright threat. He started rambling about how depressed I'd be when I got older and lost my looks, how I'd be a pathetic, undesirable waste of oxygen and stick my head in an oven. My hand trembled as I brought up my phone, dialing 999. "If you don't want the attention, if you don't like being pretty," he growled, his voice a low, terrifying rumble, "then I can make you not so pretty if you want." The words froze me, but as soon as the police operator connected, I started telling her what was happening, my voice shaking. "I'd love to cut your face off and wear it," he continued, eyes fixated on me. "I'd stare at myself in the mirror and bang on wearing your effing knickers while I pretend that I'm you." When the operator confirmed police were on their way, something snapped inside me. I started screaming at him, telling him he was going to get nicked. Only then did he finally back away, spouting threats about coming back tomorrow to teach me a lesson. Thankfully, he never did. The police arrived within minutes, and as soon as I showed them the CCTV footage, one officer recognized him instantly. Charles, or Chaz, sometimes Alexi Bowie. Apparently, Harassing lone working women was his thing. He was already weeks away from being arrested for similar complaints. I never saw Chaz again around town or the petrol station. I hope he got what he deserved. Have you ever been in a situation where a seemingly mundane interaction suddenly turned sinister, leaving you feeling utterly vulnerable? And if you thought that was unnerving, imagine a silent, staring figure and a boss's unexplained terror. I used to work night shifts at a gas station called North Star Mart near Foster, rural Virginia. It was usually quiet, sometimes only 2 or 3 customers all night. My boss, Judd, lived right next door, a good man who I trusted completely. He had just one rule for me. If anyone ever showed up late at night acting weird, call me right away. Doesn't matter if it wakes me up. I figured he was just overprotective of his business, his retirement plan. For 9 months, nothing happened. Not a single weird customer. Then, one night, I was splitting my attention between the security monitors and a movie when I saw him, a lone figure approaching the gas station. He looked like an average rural Virginia dad. Work boots, faded jeans, a baseball cap. Utterly unremarkable. Until he stopped. He didn't walk into the store like everyone else. He stopped dead outside the door, right in the view of the second camera. And then, slowly, deliberately, his head started to turn. His eyes fixed on the camera lens. It was an illusion, I knew, but it felt like he was staring directly at me. That unsettling, unmoving gaze, knowing I was being watched, sent a chill through me. This wasn't crazy lady screaming weird. This was something else. I grabbed the phone and called Judd. I described the man, his strange stillness, his unnerving stare, and then Judd slammed the phone down. I looked back at the screen. The man was gone. Not in the store, not in view of any camera. Just vanished. Before I could process that, Judd appeared on the monitors. He was running towards the gas station, clad only in his boxer shorts and a wife beater, carrying a shotgun. He burst through the door, eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen. "Where is he?" he gasped, rushing past me to the office, replaying the security footage. I was freaking out too. What was this? Who was this man that made Judd, the toughest guy I knew, grab a shotgun in the middle of the night? Judd rewound the footage, found the moment the man turned his head, staring. As he watched, Judd's face turned completely pale. Whatever he saw, whatever he knew, it terrified him to his core. He sent me home that night, called the cops, and the next day, he called me again. "I'd understand if you didn't want to come back to work," he said. I asked him, just once, who that man was. Judd paused, and then he just repeated, "I'd understand if you didn't want to come back." I thanked him for the job, wished him luck, and hung up. I still feel guilty sometimes for not visiting him more, but without knowing who that man was, without understanding the depth of terror that drove Judd to such an extreme reaction, I couldn't put myself in that position again. What chance would I have against something that scared him so profoundly? While some gas stations hide unsettling individuals, others become stages for outright horror or places where the world collapses around you. What happens when a simple fuel stop uncovers something far more gruesome, or when nature's fury traps you with strangers? You're driving late at night. The engines hum, your only companion. You pull into a gas station, a beacon of light in the middle of nowhere, just a routine stop. But what if that routine stop turns into a scene straight out of a nightmare? What if, as you're pumping gas, you glance into a dumpster and what you see there changes everything? Or What if the sky suddenly darkens, tornado sirens wail, and you find yourself trapped with strangers, battling panic, fear, and the brutal force of nature? Last November, around 1:30 a.m., I pulled off the highway into a remote gas station. Just 2 pumps. In the middle of nowhere. I was exhausted, my eyes blurry, and focused only on putting $30 of gas in the tank. Everything seemed normal until I walked to the counter to pay. That's when I realized the counter was empty. No attendant. My first thought was maybe they were in the restroom, but then I noticed the car at the pump in front was also empty. No driver. No one in the convenience store. A chill ran down my spine. Had I just stumbled upon a robbery? My hand hesitated, hovering over the glass. I looked at the car in front, a 2011 BMW 3 Series. Okay, not a Honda, I reassured myself. Less likely to be a smash and grab. Still, my unease grew. I knocked once, then twice. After the third knock, the silence became eerie, confirming something was truly wrong. I tried to open the convenience store door. It opened, unlocked. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the chilling quiet. I walked to the counter, called out a louder, more desperate, "Hello!" Then jumped over the counter, checking the back rooms, restrooms, storage, a small office. All empty. The entire gas station was abandoned. That's when the real fear set in. I pulled out my phone, ready to call 911. What would I report? A missing person? An abandoned business? I called out louder, a more desperate "hello," but still no response. So, I called the police. The dispatcher, I could sense, initially thought I was just an impatient customer. But when I explained that literally no one was anywhere on the premises, her tone changed. She asked if it looked like a robbery, suggesting an employee might still be hiding. A bit of annoyance welled up in me. I had checked everywhere, except the dumpster. As I was walking back from checking the highway, the thought suddenly hit me. Asterisk, I'll check the dumpster, just so I can tell her there's definitely no one here. Asterisk, I walked over, my stomach churning with a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. I lifted the lid. That fleeting moment will haunt me forever. 2 bodies, twisted, distorted, with dark stains on their clothes. One, unmistakably, was wearing a gas station uniform. I slammed the lid shut, backing away as if the dumpster itself were radioactive. "Oh God! Oh my God!" I mumbled into the phone, pacing in complete shock. "They're in the dumpster! My God, they're in the damn dumpster!" The police arrived 15 minutes later. By then, I had stumbled away, towards the highway, throwing up everything in my stomach. The officers spoke to me for a few minutes, then said I was free to leave. Later, I tried to search online, but while there were many articles confirming a civilian, myself found 2 bodies at a gas station. There was no explanation for how or why the 2 people were murdered. That mystery still haunts me. To this day, I'm extremely careful when driving at night. I always keep an eye on my fuel gauge, avoid night stops, and if a gas station looks too quiet, I'll just drive past. Because sometimes, a routine stop can reveal unspeakable horrors, turning an ordinary night into an indelible nightmare. But what happens when the horror isn't hidden in a dumpster, but descends from the sky? What happens when nature's fury traps you, not just with your own fear, but with the raw, palpable panic of strangers? During my senior year of high school, I often worked weekends at a rural gas station in Nebraska. One summer afternoon, I headed to my 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. shift under a clear blue sky with only a few wispy clouds. I loved those drives. The uninterrupted horizon, the world stretching endlessly. But that day, in the distance, I saw them, ominous storm clouds, rolling in like a biblical wall of wrath. Usually, they looked worse than they were, just a bit of rain. But this time, something told me it was going to be bad. When I arrived at the gas station, the local radio was broadcasting tornado warnings. My colleague and I usually just did a quick handover, but today, we had to execute a full emergency plan. We locked all the windows, secured all outdoor equipment, or pulled them inside. We checked the pumps, then completely shut off the fuel supply. My colleague went to fuel the generator while I gathered flashlights and batteries, obviously no candles at a gas station. Our designated shelter was the station's office, so we stocked a first aid kit and kept the radio on for weather alerts. We thought everyone would be home, and we'd have an eventful but relatively solitary shift. We were wrong. One by one, over about an hour, 3 cars pulled in. 2 were driven by single individuals, and 1 carried a mother with her 2 young daughters. Their road home led straight through the intensifying storm. They were desperate, begging for shelter. We couldn't refuse them. We weren't really equipped to shelter so many people overnight, but under these circumstances, refusing was impossible. We invited them to help themselves to drinks and snacks, anything to calm their nerves as the approaching storm grew scarier. And scary it was. We managed to stay calm, everyone relatively composed, until the tornado sirens began to wail. All the adults there had heard that sound before, but it terrified the young woman's 2 small daughters to their core. They screamed, cried, begging their mother to take them home. Then, debris started flying off our roof. A piece hit one of the parked cars, triggering its alarm, and the girls' cries intensified. Poor kids, they couldn't understand what was happening. Just moments later, as more things slammed into the roof, we knew that we had to get into the office. It was cramped, but we all fit. Fortunately, the thick walls shielded us from the direct sound of the sirens and the howling wind, and the girls began to calm down a little. Then, something flew across the parking lot and smashed through the store's large glass window. The sound was like a bomb exploding. It scared my colleague and me immensely, even though we had anticipated it. But for the 2 little girls, it sent them into a panic. They must have thought the entire building was collapsing. And so did one of the single drivers. As the girl screamed, she went into a full-blown panic attack, trying to run towards her car. My colleague lunged, yelling that going outside meant death. She resisted, screaming and thrashing. It took me and the other driver to restrain her. The girls screamed so hard they could barely breathe, watched her struggle a bit more, then just burst into tears. Only then did she stop resisting, crying and apologizing to us repeatedly. We huddled together through the storm for the next few hours. I remember that what truly bonded us, what kept us from being too scared, was the common goal of keeping the 2 little girls from screaming themselves unconscious. I tried my best to keep them calm and reassure them that we would all be okay. But looking back, I think we were also trying to reassure ourselves, projecting our own fears onto them. Finally, the wind died down. About an hour later, it seemed safe for everyone to move. We walked back into the store. It was completely destroyed. Glass, snacks, magazines, and debris everywhere. It was impossible to identify exactly what had broken the window. We carefully stepped through the carpet of debris. The trapped individuals, especially the young mother, thanked us profusely for our help and for helping calm her daughters when she herself was close to losing control. When they drove off, my colleague and I just stood there, looking at the wreckage, wondering, what the hell did we just go through? These stories, one of unexpected horror, one of pure resilience against nature's fury, show how quickly ordinary life can become terrifying. They show us the raw, unmasked human reactions when the thin veneer of safety is torn away. How would you react if your everyday life was shattered by such shocking discoveries, or if you found yourself facing a force of nature alongside strangers? Beneath the calm facade of small-town life, what unspeakable acts are committed, and what horrific truths remain buried, haunting generations? Our first chilling tale takes us to a quiet, unassuming town in Arkansas, a place where life moved at a slower pace, and community ties were supposedly strong. That sense of peace shattered one summer when a ninth-grade girl was brutally attacked while walking home from school. Her injuries were so severe, she required surgery, and the doctor who saved her life broke down in tears during the press conference, a testament to the sheer horror of what had been inflicted upon her. The town plunged into a collective state of paranoia. Local and state police went door to door, appeals were made in schools, and everyone lived under a cloud of fear, desperately praying the attacker would be found. This was a town where a speeding ticket was headline news for weeks. Now, they were grappling with an act of unspeakable violence. And then, the unimaginable happened. Out of the blue, a local pastor, a pillar of the community, walked into his 17-year-old son's bedroom and shot him point-blank in the head. It was his wife, the boy's own mother, who called the sheriff. She was still screaming when deputies arrived to arrest him. The pastor didn't resist. He simply let them cuff him, walked calmly to the cruiser, and at the department, he delivered a full, chilling confession. He detailed the entire chain of events: a disagreement with his son, walking downstairs to retrieve a pistol from his gun safe, then returning upstairs to commit the horrific act. He even specified the gun and caliber, but when asked why, what exactly was the disagreement so profound that it led him to murder his own child, the pastor simply repeated that he did it and asked to be taken to jail. He refused to elaborate, no matter how many times or how many different ways the deputies pressed him. Officially, the motive remains a mystery, but unofficially, in that small Arkansas town, everyone knew. The whispers, the unspoken consensus, was that the pastor's son was the girl's attacker. This, then, raises the deeply disturbing question: how did a father come to learn such a horrific truth about his own flesh and blood? A truth so profound it drove him to such an extreme act. There's endless speculation to this day, some good-natured, much of it not. But what's truly unsettling is that for many in that town, the how didn't matter. The prevailing opinion was that the pastor had done the right thing. It's a dark testament to a community grappling with horror, where private justice, however chilling, can sometimes overshadow the rule of law. What does that say about a place and the lengths people will go to protect their sense of safety? And what secrets do you think communities are willing to bury to maintain their facade? From one small town's buried truth, we move to another, equally perplexing disappearance, where a mother's shifting confessions and a chilling theory cast a long, dark shadow. On Thursday, the 16th of April, 1987, 4-year-old Marina Childress was playing in her front yard in Union City, Tennessee. Her 22-year-old mother, Pamela Bailey, was washing dishes inside, watching her daughter through the kitchen window. For just a moment, Pamela looked down, scrubbing dishes. when the screech of tires outside pulled her gaze back up. A red car with Kentucky license plates sped away from her home. At first, she thought little of it, but a terrifying realization quickly dawned. Marina was gone. A frantic search, then a call to the police. Pamela was convinced her daughter had been abducted by the driver of that red car, not just because it sped off, but because she'd seen the exact same vehicle with the same McCracken County plates approach Marina at a gas station just hours earlier that day. At the gas station, Marina, excited about candy, had run ahead, only for Pamela to find her staring up at a man she didn't recognize, who was talking to her. Confronted by Pamela, the man quickly excused himself and drove off in his red car. Police tracked down the driver to his Kentucky home. He admitted talking to Marina, allowed a brief search of his house, and was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Marina's stepfather and biological father were also cleared. The investigation stalled for 6 agonizing weeks. Then, a shocking confession rocked the community. On the 8th of June, Pamela was speaking with private investigator Stan Caves, hired by her family. In a tape-recorded interview, Pamela described how Marina's misbehavior had become unbearable. One day, after a particularly trying incident, Pamela snapped, spun around, and struck her daughter on the back of the head. Marina fell, hitting her head on a table corner, and died instantly. Pamela, fully aware she was being recorded, then claimed she hid Marina's body in her car trunk, drove to Martin, met a family friend, P.L. Summers, at a bridge, and together, they tossed Marina's body into the Obion River. Investigator Caves was stunned, but informed her of his obligation to go to the police. Pamela tearfully agreed. She was arrested for second-degree murder, and divers scoured the slow-moving Obion River. But here's where the case truly bewilders. Despite intense searches, not a single trace of Marina's body was found. Just 2 months after the supposed dumping in a relatively calm river, the body should have been recovered. Curious about this glaring inconsistency, detectives re-interviewed Pamela. Her response? She recanted everything. She claimed she'd just been released from a psychiatric hospital, prescribed a cocktail of antidepressants, and was high as a kite during the confession. Furthermore, she alleged that Caves had heavily intimidated her, threatening her with the electric chair to coerce her story. Then, she dropped another bombshell. P.L. Summers wasn't her friend. He was her lifelong abuser. And he was the one who had abducted and murdered Marina. She claimed he had threatened Marina's life weeks before the disappearance, and then the red car incident occurred. Police visited Summers, who vehemently denied everything, calling Pamela a pathological liar. His alibis for Marina's disappearance proved credible, and he too was ruled out. But months later, an unexpected twist. P.L. Summers was arrested for molesting a 9-year-old boy, suggesting that, at least some, part of Pamela's claims about him as an abuser had a chilling ring of truth. Yet, Marina's fate remained unknown. Some detectives believed Pamela was responsible. Others doubted her sanity. But all agreed. Without a body, a conviction was highly improbable. Pamela, unable to live in Union City, moved to Kentucky, where she had another son, Casey. For 12 years, they lived peacefully. Then, on the 22nd of April, 2002, just after Casey's 12th birthday, Pamela blindfolded him, led him to her car, and drove him to a cemetery. 6 days prior marked the 15th anniversary of Marina's disappearance. At a small, child-sized gravestone, etched with the single word, son, Pamela pulled out a knife and stabbed Casey multiple times. Thankfully, he escaped and recovered. Pamela was arrested again, claiming no memory of the event. She eventually pleaded no contest to second-degree assault and served only a portion of a 10-year sentence. While she was in prison, Marina's case was reopened, but again, no progress. This case is a labyrinth of contradictions. Was Pamela the killer, fabricating stories to escape? Or was she a victim herself, her sanity fractured by trauma? Consider this. A credible sighting of Marina surfaced 6 days after her disappearance at a Memphis hair salon, where 2 women brought in a girl matching Marina's description, who sobbed and asked for her mother, and was referred to as Marina. This lead was dismissed, but perhaps too quickly. And what about the man in the red car? Police ruled him out after a superficial search, yet his vehicle was spotted speeding away from the scene, and he had approached Marina just hours before. Could he have drugged Marina? Or passed her off to an accomplice across state lines? Or, more disturbingly, what if Pamela was in cahoots with this mystery driver, fabricating her confessions to confuse the investigation and mask something far more sinister? If she was too young for motherhood, adoption was an option, albeit with stigma. But a disappearance during a brief lapse of care? That would leave her blameless. But what if there was immense personal gain involved? What if Pamela Bailey, in a twist too dark to contemplate, sold her child? Between 1924 and 1960, a woman named Georgia Tan in Memphis stole and sold up to 5,000 children, charging vast sums. Her network was deeply entrenched, and incredibly, even a household name like wrestling legend Ric Flair was one of her victims. An industry that profitable doesn't simply disappear. Is it a mere coincidence that Tan's trafficking operation and Marina's disappearance occurred in the same state? It makes little sense for Pam to work with the red car driver only to report him. But what if he was a well-placed decoy in a vast, historical human trafficking network? And if Pamela was so acutely aware of the evil lurking in society's shadows, could her ultimate gift to her son Casey truly have been the promise of eternal, dreamless sleep, a dark mercy to spare him from a fate worse than death? These stories reveal the hidden depths of human darkness and the chilling mysteries that can plague a community. But what happens when an entire town falls prey to an inexplicable, collective madness triggered by history and escalating, senseless violence? Imagine an entire town, normally stoic and reserved, suddenly consumed by an inexplicable collective madness. What force could drive people to such unthinkable acts, all in a single week? Today, we journey to a place many of you might not have heard of, a small, isolated town in Estonia called Kardla, and explore a bizarre and terrifying series of events that unfolded in 1989. For those unfamiliar with Estonia, picture this. It's nestled right in Russia's armpit, as some locals humorously put it, not because of any literal anatomical comparison, but because of its geopolitical position, squeezed between the giants of Europe and Asia, with Latvia to its south and Finland to its north. Estonians are a reserved, independent, and nature-loving people. We're not exactly known for our emotional transparency. If I were to ask, "How are you?" and you replied, "I'm good," thank you, that would be considered a profound, heart-to-heart confession. This inherent stoicism makes what happened in Kardla even more unsettling. Estonia endured Soviet occupation from the 1940s until 1991. We tried to resist, but the sheer numbers of the Russians overwhelmed us. They installed a puppet communist government and began a deliberate process of ethnic cleansing, sending many of our people to Siberian work camps for real or imagined crimes, while simultaneously importing native Russians to shift our demographics. By 1989, we'd gone from 97% native Estonian to a mere 62%. We were second-class citizens in our own country, working in factories or conscripted into the army. The secret police were everywhere. You couldn't even go to the beach without permission. Being caught watching anything but Russian television could land you in jail. It was a time of deep-seated hatred and paranoia, and as the possibility of independence slowly dawned, the tension and volatility among the people reached a fever pitch. Nowhere was this more palpable than in Kardla. Kardla is the sole town on the small island of Hiiumaa, located in the Baltic Sea. Most residents earned their living from fishing or the burgeoning tourism around the island's central nature reserve. But the third, and most contentious industry, was wrecking the salvage of sunken shipwrecks. The waters around Hiiumaa were a hotbed of naval combat during World War II, leaving behind a wealth of military salvage. This practice created a massive rift between Kardla's wreckers and its fishermen. The fishermen believed disturbing the final resting places of drowned sailors would bring bad omens upon the town. Yet, the communist government, actively dismissing such silly superstitions, offered significantly better wages for wrecking than for fishing, widening the chasm between the two groups. For years, a chilling sense of foreboding hung over the town, fueled by this animosity, the perceived bad luck from wrecking, and a third, more ancient reason, the curse of the Hiiumaa witches. Now, personally, I don't believe in witches, but many people in Hiiumaa did. And belief, as we know, can compel ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Local legend speaks of a coven of witches who once inhabited Hiiumaa, capable of casting spells, shape-shifting, and summoning storms to sink ships or curse unwanted visitors. One tale describes a fisherman who insulted these witches centuries ago, condemning his descendants to generations of misfortune. Since many of Kardla's fishing families traced their lineage to this very family, the witch's curse was often invoked after a local fishing vessel was tragically lost. Again, I don't believe in the supernatural, but these legends certainly contributed to what I can only describe as Kardla's psychic earthquake. That might sound a little woo-woo, but I don't mean it in a supernatural sense. Imagine the tension in the region, the historical grievances, and the internal conflicts, all building up like the fault lines in an earthquake zone. When it finally released, it was devastating. It all happened within the space of just one horrifying week in September of 1989. The earthquake itself, the initial shockwave, began when a 16-year-old Russian cocktail waitress named Dasha Brova blew up a Russian cafe. She flooded the kitchens with gas and then ignited it. The explosion occurred late on a Saturday evening when the restaurant was packed and the kitchen staff were in the dining area, enjoying their hard-earned vodka after work. By the time they smelled the gas, it was too late. When the dust settled, 14 people were hospitalized with life-threatening injuries, and 5 more ended up in the morgue. Authorities were quick to blame anti-Russian sentiment, eager to use it as an excuse to arrest dissident Estonians supporting the independence movement. But then came the shock. The perpetrator was a quiet, popular, and academically successful 16-year-old Russian girl. What could possibly drive a well-behaved schoolgirl to such a horrific act of self-destruction, taking so many lives with her? Police were still reeling when, just 2 days later, a second tremor hit. A Russian fishing boat worker, blackout drunk at 7:30 in the morning, swerved his car into a line of school children waiting for the bus. Witnesses claimed he deliberately accelerated into them. He crashed into a wall, knocking himself unconscious. But when police dragged him from the car, he was laughing. Everyone saw it. The police, the medics, the distraught public trying to save the children. He was cackling, shouting Odin, DVA, Tri, Katerion, 2, 3, 4, counting the children who lay motionless, no longer crying or screaming. He was counting the dead. Cardla was in a state of profound shock. Within 3 days, the restaurant explosion, then 4 dead schoolchildren, and many more injured. The local medical clinic was overwhelmed, forcing many of the injured children to be transported to the mainland for treatment. It felt like a war had begun, an attack from some unknowable, malevolent force. In typical Estonian fashion, people tried to reassure themselves. Well, things can't get any worse now. It's all uphill from here. But then, things did get worse. A large funeral and vigil were held for the schoolchildren. Almost everyone in Cardla attended, and the absence of one particular family soon became glaringly obvious. A small group went to check on them, only to make a truly terrible discovery. An 11-year-old boy had convinced his 7-year-old sister to join him in murdering their parents. They woke early, crept downstairs for kitchen knives, then returned to their parents' bedroom and cut both their throats while they slept. The parents fought back, frantically trying to staunch the bleeding and fend off their own children, but their efforts were in vain. The mother's corpse was found in the bathroom, the father's in the kitchen downstairs, where he had collapsed and died trying to reach the phone to call for medical help. This was the 3rd incident of multiple murders within just a week. The town's quiet stoicism shattered. People began to wonder not if, but what would happen next. They shifted from shocked sadness to a full-blown panic. Children were kept home from school. Adults refused to go to work or engage in anything remotely dangerous. It was as if the entire town had succumbed to a collective delusion, convinced that a curse had fallen upon them. The wreckers, in a desperate attempt to appease angry spirits, began throwing some of their most valuable salvaged treasures back into Cardla's harbor, watching them sink to the bottom. Meanwhile, some of the fishermen left offerings in the woods for the Hiiumaa witches, whom they firmly believed were behind the horrifying events. It was a bizarre, all-consuming madness that made people lash out at each other and act in unprecedented ways. They waited, terrified, for the next terrible thing to happen. But mercifully, the psychic storm hovering over Cardla finally abated. Again, I don't use that term in a literal sense, but it's the only one that truly encompasses what transpired during that single week in 1989. Cardla, a town that had gone years without so much as a common assault, saw a dozen people lose their lives in a series of senselessly violent acts over just 7 days. It's almost enough to make a person believe in restless spirits or ancient Wiccan curses. But if you ask me, the true culprit is something embedded deep within our programming as biological machines. It's the lines of code we've been running since the days we lived in caves and the shadows cast monsters on the walls during long, uncertain nights.